Hey everyone, it's Kristen Jenson from Protect Young Minds, and today we have a really special guest. It's Russ Tuttle, and he has started a nonprofit, and I'm going to let him tell you about it, but it's to help kids who are being trafficked. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about trafficking and the role pornography plays in, fueling this really dangerous trend among our youth. So Russ, welcome. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me today. And just give us a little background of your Stop Trafficking project and, how you started this and what your main goal is with this project.
Sure. So the organization is called the Stop Trafficking Project, and it was kind of birthed in me about 11 years ago. I had lived quite a bit of my life overseas in the country of India, of all places. And so having grown up there and spent most of my teenage years there, I understood the concept of human trafficking before human trafficking was even a popularized term. And so I was probably one of most normal Americans who, when it came specifically to the issue of human trafficking, or maybe even more specifically sex trafficking, that my understanding was, oh yeah, it happens in those exotic countries over there, like India.
Yeah.
Problem is I'd lived 12, 13 years of my life in India. So I really understood that it's not quite what we think it is. And yes, it is happening there, and it's horrific. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So like most people, I thought, okay, only exotic countries over there. And then like most Americans, it was like, yeah, we understand there's a really serious problem south of the border and there's horrible things happening. And we feel really bad about that. But then to stop and realize that it's actually American kids protected by American law that are potentially falling into this horrific crime that we would call domestic minor sex trafficking. Honestly, that really got my attention. And so decided to start a nonprofit to kind of begin to address this issue and realize that one of the primary focuses we have to have in actually ending this kind of exploitation of kids, which includes the sexual exploitation, includes domestic minor sex trafficking, is that we have to end it before it even gets into the windshield and can enter into the kid's life, that this is something that I'm even going to entertain.
Right.
So I wanted to be different in our organization. I had a lot of people tell me, well, you start a home for victimized persons. It wasn't what I felt called to do. There's a lot of different ways we have to attack this crisis, from
right.
legislative and law enforcement, on and on. And I thought, you know what, let's do something different and let's get as far ahead of the curve as possible. And so that really was our vision. That's how we launched the Stop Trafficking Project.
Awesome. Well, I love meeting people with passion that feel a calling to make the world a better place and act on it. And not everyone can do this full time, but we can all play a little part. So, you talk about, exploitation, that there's more than meets the eye, on the surface of it. What do you mean by that? What is, and you also talk about exploitation of vulnerability, which I think means, where people are exploiting the vulnerabilities of children, right? So talk a little bit more about what is it that people and parents are not seeing? Let's go a little deeper. And how is it that, what are the vulnerabilities that are being exploited that children have?
Yeah, the challenge is that as an organization, we launched and we exist to end domestic minor sex trafficking. The challenge for people is combating sex trafficking looks nothing like sex trafficking. So again, there's these myths and there's these misconceptions that people have about this, that, oh, a white van pulls up beside this kid and abducts them off the street and they're tied up, doing horrible things to them downstairs in the basement. Well, that is so rare. Can't say it can't happen or won't ever happen or hasn't happened, but it's so rare. And one of the things that I'm personally passionate about, and is really kind of like the foundational reason for existing as an organization when we launched the Stop Trafficking Project, was to really simplify the most complex issue of human trafficking. Because on a United Nations global scale, there's 27 categories of human trafficking, $150 billion a year industry. However, if you take all of those 27 categories, Kristen, let's take child soldiers, or let's take labor forced labor.
Right,
Let's take
right.
organ harvesting.
Yeah.
Let's take child sex trafficking. You take all of those. For me, I could boil that down to it's always about three words. It's always about the exploitation of a vulnerability. So when it comes specifically to our kids in America, what we're finding is that one of the places where their vulnerabilities are exploited more than anywhere is when they're online.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the dangerous trends that we're finding in the Midwest, where we operate from, and the Missouri State Highway Patrol, we work closely with them. What we are now finding is that on average, the grooming process is now down to 8 days.
Whoa.
Where a child will be willing to either meet a complete stranger in person they first met online, or begin to share those hot pics, those nudes with someone who's asking for them, or fall into some level of sexual exploitation. So we're now down to, Kristen, to a week and a day. And part of that, I think, is because of the increased online activity of students right now with education and entertainment due to COVID-19. That's, you know, the time of year that this is being recorded right now. We're kind of beginning of September, heading into the school year, and COVID-19 has been this big thing. And we're just seeing, we're seeing vulnerabilities in kids. And what the vulnerabilities look like is not, I'm finding stranger danger online. That's not the vulnerability. The vulnerability is, I'm a lonely kid.
Yep.
I'm a kid.
And how many kids are lonely? I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
They're missing their friends. My 2-year-old grandson is lonely. Seriously. It's got to be a lot worse with older kids.
It is, because they feel isolated. And feeling isolated feeling isolated was one of the things we dealt with kids before COVID.
Right.
So now what's happening?
Now it's worse.
The trickle down is they feel depressed.
Yeah.
And we see increasingly kids wanting to die by suicide at younger and younger. So Kristen, these become the vulnerabilities. So people have these wrong ideas. And what I want to tell parents is I want you to be absolutely certain that you know exactly what your kids are doing online. And guess what? They're probably never going to be able to fully monitor everything their kids do online.
Yeah.
But what I'm on a personal goal to help people understand is there's always more here than meets the eye. Why did my kid do this crazy thing online that I told them not to? Well, there's more than meets the eye. Maybe they did that because they're bored.
Yeah.
That's the thing to address. Maybe they did it because they're lonely.
Right.
Maybe they did it because they put a picture out there and now they're scared and they're ashamed and now they don't know what to do. And so it's going to go from bad to worse.
Right. So it's going deeper to understand why these kids are doing what they're doing, not just slapping a label on them saying they're dumb, they're stupid, they're a bad kid or anything like that. And I told them not to do it and they did it. But what is the motivation under their vulnerability that creates that vulnerability? The FBI several years ago did a study, a report. I think it was also for the Department of Justice, that did this report. And the FBI basically said the risk factor for kids getting sextorted, in other words, people extorting them for sexual pictures, nude pictures, was not that they were getting online and saying sexual things or doing sexual things or anything. The vulnerability was how much time they were online. So kids that were online and interacting a lot with strangers, other people, they were actually at the highest risk for being sextorted. So it's the amount of time that kids, and so they've shifted their world to a virtual world, and on their, relationships to virtual relationships where they don't really know the people in person. So, okay, well,
and a lot of time, Kristen, that happens innocently because it's not like they just get online and immediately there's a stranger. That happens, but more often it's, me and my friend, we're connecting and we're maybe starting to talk about some stuff and some topics we maybe really shouldn't be talking about. And we let another friend of a friend of a friend into our little online world. And then all of a sudden now there's this nefarious character hanging around out there. Right. And that's one of the patterns where we see kids really falling into where they're just getting in big trouble. And that's where this concern, we've got a week and a day to once that activity happens, where this grooming process is kicking into, where a kid is actually willing to follow through on something that most parents would never dream our kid would follow.
Yeah, because we don't have the brain of a child. So we think in adult ways. And our children, they are children and they have children's brains who have not fully developed that prefrontal cortex. That's why it's, that thinking brain, that we need to help our children develop. So we have this broad kind of when kids get online, but where are kids most vulnerable? When you say, what are we talking about?
So, we've heard these anecdotes, and I know it's happened, but, kids in school doing online things and somebody, hacked into their Zoom. So those things happen. Honestly, that's not really where our priority is. Our priority really is when kids are gaming and when they're in apps specifically designed to communicate with people. Now, listen, when kids are feeling lonely and isolated and depressed, guess what they need? They can't be with their friends. Technology actually is providing some amazing space for kids to connect. So the thing for parents and guardians to process and really think through, there's more here than meets the eye. I just want to blame technology. No, there's more here than meets the eye. Technology itself is not the problem, because we know there's wonderful companies doing amazing work like Covenant Eyes and Bark and so many others that you can put technology on your technology to keep you safer from technology.
Yeah.
But it comes down to what's the vulnerability in the kid I care about.
Yeah.
And so when they're using that amazing app that they can put all these fun, make my tongue 14 feet long and all those fun little things that we can do, right? It's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But what's the underlying thing there? If I'm in that space as a kid and my frontal vortex isn't fully developed and someone reaches out to me and keeps pushing, you made the great point earlier, Kristen, when you said the vulnerability is the more time we spend online. It's no different than if we go into the grocery store. If I'm in and out, get what I want, I'm good. If I stay there a while, I don't really need this, but I think I'm going to go down this aisle. So it's no different for our kids. So they're on their favorite app and somebody says, hey, check this out. You need to see this. And all of a sudden they're on another site, or they're on another social media app. Yeah. Or maybe they're on that gaming system. They're communicating with someone and that person says, hey, I want to show you something. And what we're finding increasingly, and this is getting at younger and younger ages. I'm talking now, we're talking kids between the ages 7, 8, 9 who out here that we're finding now, and this has happened during COVID, that we're finding those kids producing what we would call images ripe for sextortion. Right. At these ages. And so that's where we just got to be really careful, because that gets into just the deepest, darkest, most nefarious place. The parents and guardians will go, I don't want to talk about this, but we have to. Yeah. Well, I know you, up until COVID, you had been speaking at a lot of schools. And so you have some examples. We can talk about these problems, but you have some really, some stories that I want you to share with our viewers and listeners about, some of these kids that have gotten victimized and pulled in and the results. So can you share a few of those stories with us of how kids are really, impacted? And these are like average kids in the Midwest from, average families. We're not talking always that these kids are, disadvantaged, kids that, have tough family situations. Some of these kids are from perfectly healthy, functional families, right? Yeah, so let me just give you the most current example, not even from being in school. Last week, I was speaking at a Chamber of Commerce event, and 4 families within 15 minutes approached me and began to unpack their stories. One of them was of a couple, both great home. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we think that vulnerability is, it's a foster kid. Yeah, they're vulnerable. Yeah. Oh, it's someone in poverty. Yeah, they're vulnerable. It's someone who's been harmed maybe in a sexual way by a family member early age. Yeah, they're vulnerable. But not my kid. I mean, my wife, we both work. I mean, we're Chamber of Commerce members. Right. And they unpacked the story, Kristen, and the story was their daughter, first week of middle school, encountered someone online, and they said it took 1 week. And remember, I just said we got a week and a day. They said, we're not exactly sure yet what happened in that 1 week, but our daughter changed. We lost our daughter. And to unpack the story for them in a way to keep everyone protected, it became so extreme so fast that just a handful of weeks ago, this girl made a serious attempt at ending her life. I mean, the things that she did, she's very fortunate to be alive. And yet she is still not recognizing the role that social media played in her vulnerabilities being exploited online, to the point to where they actually had to make the decision to pull her out of public school. They're homeschooling her. They've taken all of her devices away, but she has friends who are giving her devices on the side. And the day after they contacted me, they found images of their daughter in a beyond compromising situation, again, with yet another male on another phone. So what happens is these kids, and for this particular girl, the parents have tremendous insight and wisdom into what their daughter's facing. Remember, it's not the technology. It's what's happening with my kid. Right now, the vulnerability in this very young girl is shame and anger and physical and emotional pain that she's not quite sure how to deal with.
Right.
And so the one place that she's familiar with is, as difficult as it sounds, there's this level of trauma bonding that kicks in at younger and younger ages online that we're seeing in increasing levels, to where, okay, at least I'm being validated here, because she's kind of in that rebellious phase right now where mom and dad don't know anything. Yeah. But this person online, these people online, this group of boys online, these men online, they're telling me what I want to hear. Yeah. And so this girl has a wall up. Yeah. And Kristen, I want to, so that's a recent story. And so it's school, it's not in school, it's out of school, it's wherever. The common denominator, honestly, is when kids are online. Yeah. They don't have to be in school. They don't have to be, they can be on summer vacation, but the common denominator is what's happening online. But one of the things I want to talk about a little bit is the role that pornography plays in this.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that, because we tend to be, people tend to think of this like in a silo, right? Well, there's this silo of sex trafficking, there's this silo of child abuse, there's this silo of, but really pornography is fueling all of this. And so, in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, what we're trying to do is help parents at a very young age, teach their children the dangers of pornography. And, the one concrete thing we talk about is addiction, but there are so many other problems that come with early exposure to pornography. And we need to teach kids this disposition, this mindset that pornography, is not something that's going to be my friend. It's not going to help me. It's going to hurt me, and it's going to hurt the world and even my friends. So, tell us a little bit more about your experience and how you see the role of pornography in all the problems that you see kids are having.
Yeah. So one of the really scary patterns we saw before COVID shut down all of our school presentations in March was the overwhelming number of boys and girls that would approach after a presentation was completed. And remember, I said there's always more than meets the eye.
Yes.
They would begin to talk about issues in life and struggles, and we would just let them talk. And then here was the scary pattern: self-harm through cutting primarily. And as Doug began to dig deeper, why are you doing this, buddy? Why are you doing this, sweetheart? And well, there's naked pictures of me online. And the way those pictures got there was a number of different ways. Sometimes they felt manipulated and coerced and forced into it. Sometimes it was just, hey, I actually like the way I look and I like the attention I'm getting from men. I mean, I've heard those stories too, and everything in between. But then what it led to was I've actually considered dying by suicide. It was in February. I was at a school, and it was the weather at the time in the Midwest. I was at a school on a Thursday, and Friday they already knew they were going to be shut down because of a snow and ice storm that was coming through. And got done with the presentation, and a little girl in 7th grade walked up to me, tears in her eyes, showed me the cuts on her arm, began to unpack the picture, how and why there's naked pictures of her online. And then she looked me in the eye and she said, "I'm so glad you're here today, because I've already written my note and it's in my drawer at home. I was going to die by suicide on Saturday." We happened to be there on Thursday to unpack this issue with kids, so was able to then connect her with the caring counselor at the school. The same school, this is in February, I had a little boy, 6th grade. He walked up to me, Kristen, he hasn't gone through puberty yet. He's standing there, his face is down, he's not looking at me, and I know what he wants to talk about. And I looked at him and I said, buddy, I said, there's no shame with me. Remember in our assembly, we talked about there's no shame. There's no shame here. You can tell me anything. And he looks up and he looks me in the eye, and it's a squeaky little voice, this precious kid. And he goes, in his squeaky, he says, Mr. Tuttle. He called me Mr. Tuttle. It's like such respect. A great kid. Yeah. Such a good kid, Mr. Tuttle. Have you heard of this thing called Pornhub?
Yeah.
Yeah, buddy. I've heard of Pornhub. Yeah. He says, I'm addicted. He said, I stumbled onto it accidentally when I was in the 2nd grade. He's now a 6th grade. He's got 4 years of this. And one of the things he said to me,
you would never think to look at these kids. You would never think.
Mm-hmm. And he said, the way you talked about pornography, thank you for telling me the truth about this. He said, because it feels like my brain's on fire. Can you please help me? Again, had connected with a great counselor there at the school and other people in the community that we could help this kid. So he recognizes, because one of the things, years ago when we started these school presentations, my goal was I want to keep kids safer in this context of there's horrible people out there looking to do horrible things by exploiting the vulnerabilities in our kids. Right. And at least in the worst case scenarios, this crime we call domestic minor sex trafficking. In between that, there's all kinds of horrific exploitation. Right. Sexual exploitation. So my goal was let's put this together to keep kids safer. We found when you tell the kids the truth, they respond. Absolutely. Now, because of pornography, another goal is we've got to figure out ways to keep kids from becoming predators themselves. Yep. Because the activity that we're starting to see now. So I had a 16-year-old boy. 2 16-year-old boys approached me within a couple months of each other. The first one came up, thanked me for talking about the truth about pornography. Again, stumbled onto it by accident as a young boy. His fear was this. He said, I'm now fantasizing about hurting girls the way I view it on pornography. And these girls are my friends. I feel like I'm out of control. Please help. Wow. So grateful for this kid. Like, you're not a bad kid. Yeah. The science of the brain, what's happening. These are not bad kids. It's one of the things I want adults and guardians to understand. Because there's more here than meets the eye. And I get really frustrated with parents and guardians when they say, these kids these days. Mm-hmm. Can't believe what these kids these days are doing. And it goes beyond that. Yeah. The other 16-year-old boy, similar story, good looking kid. He's like 6'2", 185 pounds, kind of the stud athlete in the school. Walks up, tears coming down his face. Before we say a word to each other, I know what he's going to talk about. Yeah. Same story, stumbled onto pornography at a young age, but then his took a little different twist. He said this, he said, pornography prepped me for when the 21-year-old, in his words, smoking hot naked woman sent me pictures of her. I was ready to respond immediately. Right. He recognized that pornography played a role. Sure. He met her twice in person because I was like, dude, time out. I've heard this story before because we know how creepy men copy paste pictures of females, send it to a young boy, try to meet them. I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure this is a woman? He said, I met her twice. And in teenage vernacular, he said, we hooked up. Yeah. He said the third time she invited me to a party. He said, and I showed up and she wasn't there, but there was a house with men in it waiting for me. That's in the world of domestic minor sex trafficking where she's a spotter. Oh. Probably being paid to. She reels them in. She reels them in. So now the myth is, okay, pornography and boys, get it. Okay, let's talk about pornography and girls. Yeah. Because I increasingly have boys come to me and say, I've been friends with this girl since like 1st grade, kindergarten, 4th grade, whatever. And she all of a sudden sent me naked pictures of, and I didn't even ask for her. What is she doing? I recently, before COVID shut us down, this is again in February, I was at a rather prominent private Catholic school in the Kansas City area. At the end of the presentation, I had 11 girls in 11th and 12th grade come to talk to me very seriously about and challenge me on some of the things that I was giving some pushback on during my assembly. And they said, this is what the gist of what they said. They said, we actually like how we look naked online and we enjoy the attention we're getting from men. And so I began to drill down, why are you feeling this way? And what all they said was, well, it's kind of what they were being taught through pornography. Right. And so there's an expectation. And so what we need to understand as parents and guardians is there's just 3 words. It's about the exploitation of a vulnerability. So if the kids are coming at this, and now we've got this vicious cocktail of pornography that we add to, I'm a lonely kid, I'm an isolated kid, I'm a depressed kid, maybe I'm being bullied online. You add to that the vicious effects of pornography. We've got to pay attention to this, because then where it leads kids is they react.
Yeah.
And typically in the immediacy of the moment, because they're not thinking it through, because
Right.
the cortex isn't, it's just the immediacy of the moment. So I'm
Right.
going to.
They're impulsive, and they can become very compulsive because their brain isn't developed, and no one has walked them through, all of the issues related to porn and how porn will teach them to objectify themselves. And we use this word objectification, just, trips off the tongue. But I mean, when you really think of how dehumanizing it is to turn your body into a product for someone else's consumption, and that's all you're worth. And social media just amplifies this trend, because the sexier, hotter the picture that you post on Instagram or wherever, the more likes you're going to get. And girls learn this at a very young age. The more attractive they are, the more hot they are, the more, likes they get, and the more attention they get. And this is amplified and taught explicitly in pornography. Pornography isn't about two, loving people that get together and have sex, and we're just kind of showing this. No, it's all about exploitation of the and objectification. So these messages are so clear to these kids, and they may not be aware of them, but it really goes through, and then they're objectifying themselves. And it's not just pornography, it's our whole culture that we have. So, I think that, and you mentioned earlier about child on child harmful sexual behavior. And I was at a symposium. We hosted, Protect Young Minds helped to host this symposium with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation a year or so ago. And it is a disturbing trend how children are watching pornography. They are wired to imitate, what they see adults do. And so then they naturally, many of them want to try this out on a younger, more vulnerable child. And they find a younger sibling, they find, a cousin or a friend next door. And then you've got a child on child, really, you can call it child abuse. We call it harmful sexual behavior. But, you worry about your kid being a victim of child abuse. Wait till you have a situation with your child, your good kid has now been pulled into and has become, now predator is a very strong word, but, to victimize other children. And you've got a huge problem that, if you're in the right state and you can get help, thank your lucky stars. But our justice system, our juvenile system across the United States has not caught up with this problem. In some states, they're going to be put into juvie. They're going to be, slapped on a sex offender registry, which they may be there for the rest of their lives. And this is a huge problem. Okay, so we know the problems. Pornography teaches kids to objectify themselves. It sexualizes them at a young age. They get addicted. Sometimes they act out on this, and that feeds, sex trafficking, and that feeds a lot of problems with kids, and just sets them up to want to act out sexually. That just is a normative, right? It's normal. All right, so give us some hope. So what can we do? What can we do to help kids, and what are we going to do as a preventative?
Yeah. So the preventative is honestly, it's the most important thing. And one of the things that we're finding is when we are able to go to students directly, it's one model that works. That's why your books are so important. It's why we promote your books. It's why it's like at younger and younger ages, we have to get those into the hands of caring adults. And caring adults have to understand that they have to become a safe landing spot for their kids. their kids are going through levels of trauma. Now,
Right.
that may seem like a rather, over the top term, but you stop and think about the things that kids are going through. There are levels of trauma at certain ages that, okay, you as an adult forgot what that was like in second grade. Well, it's traumatic to them.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to be a safe place starting earlier on, then when it gets later in life and they're experiencing something online that is truly of a nefarious level, they're not going to go to you as a trusted adult. Why would they? So,
Right.
so now for the parent who's kind of like they're behind the curve already, I hear this all the time. I've got a 16-year-old son or daughter, and it's too late for me to start this now. If I'm going to start to implement some new things, I'm like, it's never too late. And they'll tell me all the time, well, it's gonna be like a world war. And I'm like, yeah. And we look back and we know World War I was worth fighting, but you don't win the whole war just once. It's a battle. So
Right.
pick your battles. So maybe it's as simple as, okay, for a younger parent, just determine now that you're not going to get them technology at really young ages. One of the movements I love is the wait till 8 movement. Like there's groups of parents around the country. They've almost covenanted with each other that we're not going to let our kid get a cell phone until they're in the 8th grade. It's not 8 years old, it's 8th grade. And when they get that cell phone, there's not going to be a lot of internet options on that thing. And well, you're not keeping up with the Joneses very well in that way. Yeah, but guess what? I'm not supposed to be my kid's best friend. I'm supposed to be their parent. And this is a boundary that we're going to put around that.
So that's one thing, is be careful with the technology, knowing that your kid is going to have access maybe through other friends, but themselves, they don't have a portal to porn in their pocket 24/7. And, we have a couple of articles on Protect Young Minds that talk about, like a 4-step plan to help you start with technology and grow them and mentor them so that as you give them more and more access, they're showing more and more responsibility and the ability to handle. To give a kid a smartphone in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade here, that is just, you should just expect major problems with that move. So yes, wait until 8th, man. I wish they would wait until 16 years old, but as long as you have a plan and you are increasing the responsibility, and if they are following the guidelines that you set with the lower technology, then at some point you can bump it up to a little bit more. That, is what we need to do. So that's the first thing that you're talking about, is don't just give kids throw the kids, here are the keys to my huge, truck, go have fun. And you're only, 7 years old. Make sure that you have mentored them and that what they can get into as well as on that technology.
Yep. Because
That's
if we don't, I've had girls as young as 2nd grade show me their Tinder accounts. Tinder is an adult dating hookup app.
God, 2nd grade Tinder.
She had 17 adult men she's communicating with, and most of it was sexual content, and she's 2nd grade. Why does that 2nd grade have a phone?
That's an 8-year-old.
Yes.
That's an 8-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah, blow your mind. Okay, so one thing is be very careful with technology. You also mentioned talking about, so that's the first thing. So what are some other things?
So the second thing is please know the vulnerability in your kid. So that's honestly more important than the technology. So we have to understand the role technology will play in the vulnerability in the kid you care about potentially being exploited. Let's just come to that agreement. So yes, there's the technology. So do everything you can within your power to protect that technology by using other technology, using cell phone contracts, whatever you need to do. But the next thing is, and this is going to be different for every family, for every kid, because every kid's vulnerability does not look like the next kid's vulnerability. So know the kid you care about.
Your kid. Yeah.
And so that plays into the family unit first, and then that extends into our churches and our schools and the groups in your neighborhood. Contextually, the kids that hang out, your friends come over to your house because they're going to hang out with you. Okay, pay attention to the vulnerabilities in those kids and be vigilant about that. And one of the things that is important about that is don't ever say not my kid or not the kid that I care about.
Right.
because that goes kind of on a, I found that kind of on a geographical sense, adults fall into this. Well, we're urban core. Okay, we're downtown people. Great. So that can't happen to my kid because we're too street smart. Wrong. We're suburbs. We're suburbs, right? We got it going on out here. We're all fine. It can't happen to my kid. Wrong. We're ultra rural. We leave the black lab in the back of the pickup truck. He'll be there in 8 hours. We never lock the doors. Can't happen to my kid. Wrong. Because the common denominator is when those kids are online with their vulnerability, the more time they spend there. So monitor, I mean, the technology part, it has so many bullet points to unpack on that. Know every password your kid has.
Right. And I also say,
that's all in your phone. It's you're not invading their privacy.
Right. Never give a kid technology. Lend them your technology.
Absolutely.
Never give a kid an iPad. You know, say, here's an iPad. It's mom and dad's iPad. But you can use it under these conditions.
Yep.
And then it's always mine to pull back. There's a different psychology.
Yep.
To give a kid technology, then they think it's mine. And if it's mine, then I can make decisions around it and I can do whatever I want with it. And no, you can't. So don't give kids technology, lend them technology, and make sure you're very clear about the terms of that technology. So again, we go back. Now you talk about emotional resilience, basically, and you know, knowing their issues. We have a lot of articles on Protect Young Minds about emotional resilience. We've done surveys and found that our followers are very concerned about developing emotional resilience in children so that they are less vulnerable to these dangers, right? So this last year, we have been putting out for our subscribers every month, we've been putting out a resilient parenting challenge, which describes, you know, one way, whether it's increasing your child's confidence or their feeling of control or, you know, their competence, all these things that add to emotional resilience. So important, because if you take an emotionally vulnerable child and then you add technology, that's like adding, you know, fuel to the flame. Let's, you know, gas lighter fluid on a little barbecue. It's going to magnify the vulnerabilities that they have. So emotional resilience is really, really important.
Yeah,
so that's great.
Because when we encourage people, we tell them this, okay, pay attention to the technology, yes, because that's what parents are coming to us. They're like, well, that's our number one concern. Okay, let's get that out of the way. There's things you can do. Second, you better know your kid. Third, don't start with your kid from this default position. I'm expecting you to be all messed up in this. I'm expecting you to fail. I'm expecting that you're going to have technology and you're just going to find the worst stuff on there. Don't start with that premise.
That's good.
Not a person in the world wants to be shamed into or out of doing something. So you encounter that kid who's made a mistake. Don't shame them right out of the gate. Understand it's not these kids these days. It's, okay, ding dong adult. You're the one who gave the second-year-old girl the cell phone. Now you're crying to me because your daughter's got 17 adult men that are potentially sexually exploiting her online. Okay, so in that moment, I don't have very many mercy gifts with parents like that. But it's like it's not going to do me any good to shame that parent in that moment either, because most parents are just not thinking this through. So that's why your book's important. That's why all the different organizations are doing the similar things that what we do is critically important. We get out there ahead of the curve before the vulnerability can be exploited. That's really critical. So for the parents, don't start from that default position, but put the parameters in place. So it's the classic example of we've got to build a fence at the top of the cliff, because it's better to put our efforts there than putting a bunch of ambulances at the bottom of the cliff after they fall off.
Right.
And that's what's going to happen. And that's what is happening for far too many kids. Again, I mean, if we're down to a week and 8 days in the grooming process before a kid is willing to engage in some of the most nefarious things most parents and guardians would say would be my kid.
Right.
If that's the pattern, then we just have to be honest about that as adults who care about kids and go, okay, we've got to build the fence around the top. So understand that that's your technology, understand knowing the vulnerabilities of kids, and then don't start from that default position. And then another thing I would add is continue to learn and get every resource possible that is positive. There are resources out there that start from a negative place. That's why I love your books. I love what you do. So start from the positive place with your kids, because that's going to motivate them. Listen, people are happier when they're around happy people. So people are less likely to fall into really dangerous patterns online when they're hanging out with people who are exercising safe patterns online. So you as a parent need to set that example first. So I know you're working from home, and I get that there's a lot of things happening online, but you've got this thing, and maybe you're just now taking your time to flip through whatever apps are that you use, and your kid comes and says, I need to talk to you, but you're too busy on social media yourself. Well, guess what? We've just set a really bad example. So as parents and guardians, we have to lead by example. And honestly, we've all been to restaurants when they used to be open and seen the family of four, and the dad and the mom and the son and the daughter, everybody's looking at their devices.
Yeah, I've seen this. And I've also I remember seeing this father and son, they're at Costco, and the mom has a cart, and, and the dad is just going around with his device, just looking here. And the poor little son, he's got to be like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. And he just kind of keeps looking up. Dad never talking to him. Dad's always on the phone, and I just wanted to go up to that father and say, do you see what's happening here? But I've been guilty of that myself. And I remember this one time when my grandson was over, and I got this really strong thought that came into my head that said, you need to put down your device when this, and he was only 1.5 years old, whatever. You cannot be on your device around your grandchildren and be giving more attention to this than them. And it kind of was like a smackdown in a little bit. It was like, okay. But I think that we do need to set a good example, and we can. And, all of us have been sucked into technology. It is designed to suck us in and keep us there as long as possible. These people that make Facebook and Instagram and all these, they know how the brain works. They know the dopamine, patterns. And so they exploit that to keep us online so they can send us more ads. So, I mean, this is well known, but most of us out there don't totally understand that. So I think what I'm hearing you say is, number one actually is be proactive. Don't get fooled by this deception, really, that only bad kids get in trouble, or only kids from bad families get in trouble with bad pictures, and that porn is shameful, but it's not shameful to talk about. And it's really not shameful if you've been hurt by it, even, because, it is, it does exploit the vulnerabilities of children. So make sure that you are being proactive. Russ, I get the question a lot, what if I talk to my child about pornography and then they go and look for it? Then I'm guilty of introducing pornography to them. And I'm like, look, you are not going to make your kid more curious than all this sexual cues that are coming in and all the cues from around them. Let me tell you, you cannot do worse than what is already happening. So the safest bet is to be proactive and do it sooner than you think. Sooner is safer. Love the hashtag, right? Sooner is safer. And then number two, so that was the first thing. 2, make sure that you're handling the technology, not giving it to them too early, stepping it up, and then we were talking about this is all kind of blending together, but taking care of those emotional vulnerabilities, right? Knowing your child, understanding their emotional needs, and understanding how they could be searching to get that emotional need fulfilled through online, being online. And we are trying to deal with that at Protect Young Minds. And also we've come out with this brain defense, digital safety, where we talk a lot about, safe screen habits and good technology habits. And this is what we really need to teach our kids, is how to deal with the technology so that they benefit from it, but are not hurt by it, right? So that it helps them, doesn't hurt them. So,
Yep.
Well, Russ, thank you so much for being, with us today and everything.
Welcome.
Is there one last bit of advice you want to throw out to parents with all of your experience?
Yeah, I will say this: kids want to be told the truth, and you need to believe in them, because I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't actually believe in students. And at younger and younger ages, that we know this, it's common sense, they're more teachable.
Mm-hmm.
And as the graphs go, because we give kids surveys measuring their vulnerabilities and then the impact that our presentations make, as younger and younger, they're more teachable and they're willing to make changes and they're less vulnerable. As they get older, the vulnerability increases and they become less teachable. So this is why your books are so important at the youngest ages, to start that pattern. One of our strategies in the Midwest is we're working on a strategy to get into schools to where a student would be able to participate in one of the strategies that we offer to schools at least 3 times through their school career. We would hope that they would experience something we offer in elementary age, middle school, junior high, and then high school, to kind of reinforce that through the entire process in a school district. So
that's great.
So there has to be consistency on the part of parents and adults and guardians. Be consistent, be compassionate, and then don't be compulsive to go, oh my word, my kid made a horrible thing, we're just going to rip the internet out of the house.
Right.
That's not helpful.
Yeah.
You exercise wisdom in this and understand that, honestly, a lot of times you're not arguing with your kid in these situations, you're arguing with a fantasy, because they are increasing fantasy worlds for themselves. And this is the last thing: kids have fake accounts. So parents, you think that you know everything your kids are doing. You've got all their Snapchat and Instagram and Omegle and Kik and TikTok and all that. Well, guess what? They typically will have a fake account you have no clue about, especially the kids that are really desperate to make connections with other people. So don't point fingers, go bad kids, but we do have kids doing some bad things online. So there's a big difference there.
And some harmful things.
Believe in our kids.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Russ. This has been really illuminating. And one of the big things that we're trying to do is to, increase the awareness of parents so that they are empowered to raise screen smart and, resilient, emotionally resilient children, and to really take advantage of all the wonderful things around technology. But be protected from it. So thank you so much, Russ. We really appreciate all of your experience and everything that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Take care.